The challenges are many. The first one is geopolitics. I just mentioned it, but it is quite clear that because of Putin's terrible behavior, we are lapsing back towards a world of the West against the rest, against China with Russia, which is quite worrisome. I don't think they have a very strong alliance, but they do work together more and more. The West being relatively limited, you know, the Canadians, the Americans, us, and then maybe New Zealand, or maybe Australia, certainly not India, certainly not Africa, certainly not Latin America. So we have a problem. And the other problem is, if I may be a bit open about this, is it has also pushed us again back into having to align to the Americans as a junior partner. We as a junior partner. Now, in the present circumstances, this is the only thing we should do, because that's the only way to help Ukraine. And this is about hard security. But in the longer term, I'm worried, because I've seen what happened when Trump was a president in the United States. I do not know how the midterm elections will go. I do not know who will be the next president in the United States. So this idea that, you know, we'll get back to the situation after the 40s, when we had a rock solid relationship with whoever was in the White House, a strong commitment to Europe, I do not think that's necessarily given. The second major challenge is, of course, our neighborhood. No one knows how the war will end in Ukraine. I hope it will end with the defeat of Putin and with the Ukrainians recuperating their land. They do a fantastic job, I have to say. It's very impressive how they fight for their country. But of course, there are many questions. You know, how much will the Russians destroy? I mean, what they're doing now is just wanton destruction, both of civil and other objectives, bombing people. It's absolutely terrible. This being said, at some stage, we will also have to reflect on future relations with Russia. I mean, the idea that, you know, we will forever cut all ties to Russia, I don't think that's a realistic prospect, nor is it one I would like to. Russia remains a big neighbor with huge, it's a weak country. It's a weak country in terms of demography, of economics thing. It could actually implode, which would not be good either. It was supposed to be militarily very strong. Of course, it has nuclear arms, so we have to be careful. In the longer term, let's assume Putin has to go. They change. Now, you could have a worse regime. That's possible. You could also have a change and maybe more democracy and a return to a more reasonable thing. In that case, there's no reason why we shouldn't try to establish some relations with Russia. The Ukraine crisis has also brought to the fore the question of the future composition of the EU enlargement debate. If you'd asked me 2 years ago, is there any chance of Ukraine joining the EU? I would have said 0. So like all the big experts, you know, who are more often wrong than the people who are not experts, so I would have been completely wrong. The fact of the matter is that since Putin has burned the bridges, well, some bridges were also burned in the other direction, as you all know, I think it's a bit as the Union said, okay, then we will take in Ukraine. And this is what was decided in June last year. It's a major change. It's like the joining of NATO by the Finns and the Swedes is a major geostrategic change thing. So, but of course, enlargement, you have the whole Western Balkans. How are we going to do this? Do we have the absorption capacity? What does it mean for us? So that will be a major theme over the next few years. Then, of course, we have the neighborhood with countries like UK and Turkey, for instance. Turkey is a candidate country. I don't believe they will ever join, particularly the way things go now. It's a difficult partner. It's a very important country, but it's a very difficult partner. The UK has decided to leave. Relations are very difficult right now. Very frankly, 90% is the fault of the UK government, the Conservative Party, because the way that they behave towards the EU is, I find, unacceptable. They'll come off it because they need good relations with the EU over time. I'm convinced of that. And we are interested in the best possible relations with the UK, of course. But they will have to understand that and as British, they should understand this, that if you leave a club, well, then you're no longer a member of the club. You cannot have, you don't pay the the fees, the participation fees, but you want to have the benefit. That doesn't work. And we would be completely crazy if we allowed them to get away with it. We have to preserve peace in Ireland, absolutely crucial. We've done a deal in good faith, which they call into question. Anyway, I think we're having presently difficult times. The first time I heard a recent British Prime Minister say anything positive about the EU was at the conference on the political community in Prague, Liz Truss, but then Liz Truss, I don't know how long she will stay in power. Anyway, we need a partner on the British side. It's for them to decide who it will be, but who looks at the EU and our relations not through ideologically tinted glasses, which the Conservatives have done over the last years increasingly, but pragmatically. I always was a huge admirer of British pragmatism, but where is it today? I hope it's coming back. COVID is not over, and more importantly, we are certainly going to have other viral infections. So we really have to coordinate more, probably do more Europe. I was talking about migration pressures. We have done a very good job taking in Ukrainian refugees, but of course this was not done under asylum rules, but it was done under temporary protection, as it should be in the case of a massive influx from a neighboring country. Most Ukrainians want to go back, I'm sure of that. So a lot depends on the future of their country. But it is a debate. The migration will remain a general huge challenge. Energy, I mean, is obvious. We all see it every day. It's a major issue for all of our business. The gas prices, the petrol prices, the social effects of this. So there's a lot of talk about this. I read this morning a very good interview in Le Soir by Timmermans. If you can have hold of it, read it, because it's sober, it's honest, it's not spinning. He says the truth, but he also is reassuring us to some extent for the future. I think it's the Commission at its best, that's the Commission's role, provide answers, warn us against false good solutions. Timmermans says at some stage, there are no easy solutions to complex situations. I think Einstein said something similar, so we're in good company here. Now, if you look, I looked up some figures, facts and figures about energy in 2020. So this was before all the events happening, because now, for instance, our gas imports from Russia have, it's only 7%. Before it was more than almost 40%. Anyway, but in 2020, our energy mix is oil 34.5%, gas 23.7, renewable 17.4, nuclear 12.7, coal 10.5. What does that say? Well, it says that if we want to be carbon free in 2050, well, we have to do a lot of work, because we depend for 70% on carbon emitting sources. That's the first thing I wanted to leave you with. Then we are net importers, huge net importers. There's not one of our member states who is self-sufficient in energy. Overall, 57.5% of our energy we consume comes from imports. 25% of all energy needs, this is from Russia, was from Russia. In gas, the import rate was 84%. Imports from Russia, more than 40% of our imports, of our gas needs. Oil, 97% dependency. So just saying this, there cannot be a simple solution. And if some people say, okay, we just put a price cap on the gas or on oil and all, well, someone is going to pay the price. If the prices go up because there's more demand than offer, you'll have to pay the price. So, I think what the Commission is trying to do is more intelligent. They try to have a mechanism which avoids excessive volatility, but the prices will not go down to the level of before, I'm afraid. That's just the reality. We should also link positively the present challenges to the climate change ambition, which we should not lower, because it's also part of the answer. If we control more our demand, because if we don't do something for demand, in view of the figures we're having now, we're not going to achieve our objective for 2050. So we have to do that anyway. Now, by doing that, we will also lessen our dependency. We have diversifies, of course, our energy sources. So all of this is a major issue. Then the digital revolution. There, I think Europe has a major role to play. Now, a digital world is both a dream and a nightmare. It's a dream because we can solve problems we could never solve before. We can facilitate trade deals. We can, get people to express themselves directly and voice their concerns. We have fantastic things we can do in health terms. We can operate from afar. We can help African countries. We can do an amount. So it's a dream in many ways. But at the same time, it could be a nightmare, as you see, for instance, the cyber attacks, the hybrid attacks are becoming extremely dangerous. You see what happens with drones and other things, with attacks against our infrastructure, including our IT infrastructure. In terms of democracy, well, yes, it could be a tool for democracy. It is also a tool to undermine democracy, as we've seen, by fake news, by trolls. The Russians have tried massively to interfere in some of our elections and continue to do so. In any event, the fact that everybody can freely write and sometimes anonymously atomizes society calls into question representative democracy. So while there are huge opportunities, there are just as huge risks. There comes in the EU. I think this can only be handled level to EU. The EU has one big advantage in this. We are a regulatory super, and we have started seriously regulating digital platforms and all of that. I don't know whether you followed. If not, you just read up on this, the Digital Services Act and the Digital Market Act. You have to look at those issues because we are trying to provide regulation, because the free flow of data is the new oil. It's absolutely vital. But if you don't create a minimum of trust in terms of privacy, in terms of values, in terms of protection, then people will not trust it, and you will create chaos and havoc. So the Union has done regulation also in data protection. Now, it's important that we do not just do protection, because otherwise we will end up with the protection and the Chinese and the Americans will end up with the data use, which would be dramatic from our view. It would be even more dramatic because actually, because of our strong public service, we have probably the best public service data in the world. Now, we should use them, but we should use them in a responsible way. So that's a huge challenge for the EU as a whole and all our member countries. Economic governance, I just mentioned it quickly. You've seen the return to inflation, very worrisome. I was always asking how we would get into a more sort of reasonable managing of our debts after COVID, after the crisis in 2010-12. That was already a challenge because, of course, we logically had to open up this, the gates and create, do quantitative easing, create more money. That was entirely logical, increase the debt. But there comes a point when if you increase the debt, your margin of maneuver and your resilience will become smaller and smaller. Now, with the present crisis adding itself on this, requiring again new expenditure, because for instance, people talk about softening the blows of a high gas price. Yes, who pays? Well, it's the public service. It's the public budget normally which pays. And finally, of course, we have a challenge to our democracies internally, partly what I mentioned already before via social media, but also otherwise by attacks from outside, by internal divisions. Society is becoming more and more opposed. You see this in the United States. The polarization between the Democrats and the Republicans is just enormous. Well, we have it to some extent in our European countries. In many countries like Finland or Holland or Denmark, you need, or Belgium, you need 5 to 7 parties to form a government. Even in Germany, you had a system where you always had one of the Volksparteien together with the FDP or the Greens. Now you already need 3. So there is an atomization. We have a huge challenge there, and we have to be aware of this. We have a debate about rule of law, of course, which is difficult with some of our countries. So that is another huge challenge.